is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback. Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's fired. He throws.
It's time for Past Our Prime. Hello, and thanks for downloading this week's show. I'm your host, Scott Johnston, Bill Mahoney, and Mark Hoffman on hand for the 125th straight week. I cannot shake these guys, and trust me, I have tried. May 24th, 1976, Larry Robinson of the Montreal Canadiens on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Bill, one of the best to ever lace up the skates.
Yeah, just an amazing Hall of Fame defenseman. Played many years in Montreal, was a leader of that team, even though you don't hear about him a lot because you're talking about Yvan Cornier and Guy Lafleur and guys like that. But man, Robinson, he raised the Kings level when the Kings acquired him many years after Montreal. Just an amazing player. And then you realize he wasn't just a defenseman. He could beat the heck out of you if they needed to. You know, you read that little magazine, you find out how many guys he was hitting. And then if you read any type of comments when we put up on the social medias about Dave Schultz was a tough guy. Like at least 5 of them will say, well, Larry Robinson pounded him. So Larry Robinson was not a man to mess with either defensively or with the fists.
Yeah, went on to have a good coaching career, came to the Kings. In fact, we're going to speak with longtime Kings announcer Nick Nickson, a Hall of Famer in his own right, about Larry Robinson and get his perspective on one of the great defensemen in the history of the National Hockey League. But first, a quick note on book talk.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I know this always gets people, but Dick Francis is the author. He was a jockey first before he picked up the pen. He wrote 44 novels, drawing heavily from his experience in the world of horse racing. He built a long career writing fast-paced mystery novels. He became a full-time author. He was a champion jockey in Britain. He even rode once for Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. But get this, he sold over 60 million books in his life, writing 44 mysteries. Sports readers, I know my dad enjoyed his stuff back in the day. 60 million books, man. That's a lot of books, no doubt about it.
And he has 2 first names, which I like. Dick and Francis. You know, Francis can be a guy, depending on how you spell it.
Yeah, it can be.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just don't call him Francis.
Yeah. Surely you're jesting.
Exactly.
Lighten up.
You're on my list. You just made the list.
Hey,
Mark,
before you, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to get us to scorecard, but if you've got something.
Well, before we get to scorecard, I have an apology I have to make on the air.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. Last week.
Go ahead. Hold on. Bill, are you ready?
I'm ready. Come on, let it out.
He really took it out on you the other day, and he's going to apologize.
No, that son of a bitch can screw himself.
Yes.
No, so last week I made fun of Craig Morton in the jockey ad, saying that he was like wearing just like a really, really skimpy thing and, maybe he shouldn't. And I don't know. I was just making fun of him. And then I find out a day later he passed away.
Oh, so my God, you killed him.
Really bad. Craig lived a great life, lived to do his 80s. And though I have to say, as a Cowboy fan growing up, I liked Roger Staubach better. Craig was a great college quarterback and played for a long time in the NFL. In fact, I think he was the Broncos quarterback the year that the Cowboys beat the Broncos.
It was.
But, he threw a wobbly ball sometimes. See, there I go again. I'm insulting a guy who just
let him die, man.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to the entire Craig Morton family because I did cheer for him as I was a Cowboy fan. So, again, I apologize for the jockey ad. But
the wobbly ball, you can go stick.
I mean, he did throw a wobbly pass,
Yeah. So, and he did throw that one. Well, it wasn't his fault. In Super Bowl V, the pass went off Dan Reeves' hands and got picked off, which set off the winning score for Baltimore.
Yes.
Still bothers me to this day, 55 years ago.
Ugh.
Damn. That's holding on to it for a long time.
Yep. Thank you, because the Yankees and Tigers are playing a game, and well, I think Roy White is at the plate, and there are a couple men on base, and he hits a fly ball to Ron LaFleur in center, and so that's it, right? Simple, medium velocity drive to center field, and of course Ron LaFleur, well, he can't catch the ball. And there was a runner on first, Jim Mason, or he was leading off second, and then and Mickey Rivers was on first, and there was one out in the inning. So Mason didn't even wait to see whether the ball was caught. He just starts running blindly to third base, and the third base coach DeKalser's waving him back. So LaFleur drops the fly, okay, and then the comedy really ensues. So. A confused, Mason rounds third, falls down, gets up, labors towards home plate. LaFleur picks up the ball, throws it to catcher John Walkenfuss, who tags Mason out for the second out of the inning. But then Walkenfuss, great last name, apparently thinking the tag on Mason was the third out in the inning, rolls the ball back to the mound, as catchers do usually at the end of the inning. So the pitcher, Bill Laxton, leaps towards the ball as Rivers is heading home, and he keeps running, and he scores on the play.
Roy White reached first on LaFleur's error. He went to second on the throw-in, third on the catcher's error, scored on the pitcher's error. So that was your Detroit Tigers in the 70s.
Yep.
Bunch of clowns.
Yep. Yeah. Well, no, because 75 was the 19-game losing streak. 76, there was some hope. You had Mark Fidrich. And then the following year, Alan Trammell and Lou Whitaker were coming up in the minor leagues and made their debut. So there were brighter days ahead for the Tigers.
Not today.
No.
Bill Reardon, Bill, tell us about him.
We all remember him. He was best known for managing Jimmy Connor's career. Well, now he's got a new passion. It's called skateboarding. He's now managing 17-year-old skateboard phenom Ty Page. Skateboarding was just about to become big in the 70s, and Reardon really knew what he was doing, because this Ty Page, he helped get Page, Reardon did, a skateboarding contract worth around $100,000 annually. And Ty Page was pretty good. He was inducted into the Skateboarding Hall of Fame in 2016. Reardon did know talent, if nothing else.
Wow, $100,000 back then for
That's
a
a lot of money.
skateboarder is crazy.
And that's when the skateboard trend really took off.
That's right.
A bunch of surfers. Right. I picture Bill in high school, long blonde hair, skateboarding.
Oh God, no! God, no! You no hair.
Thinking of the wrong person.
Oh God, yeah, no. I did have long hair, but it didn't grow long. It grew out. It's just a lot of hair. Even Callie said, she goes, "Did you not know it looked weird?" I said, "Yeah." Yeah.
Not at the time. I had some real bushy hair.
The chip tooth and the crazy it's crazy stuff. Sorry. No, it wasn't. No.
I had my hair didn't grow long. It grew out like a chia pet. I had some really
that was mine, did.
Gnarly, thick.
No one's at their best at age 12, 13. They call it the 14, awkward stage 15, for
16. Come on.
You're about to hit your peak, Billy.
Yeah, damn right. That's the thing. You learn a lot now. I look back at those pictures, and I have to go over a lot of times with Callie, and she'll go, what were you thinking, Dad?
Hey, bell bottoms.
Kids are the best.
And she'll just stare at the picture and go, wow. What
That's pretty ugly.
Yeah. And I'll go, Callie, I had a much different upbringing than you. Yeah, you sure did.
None.
Exactly. So no, it was, I wish I did. All my friends had that long flowing brown hair and blonde hair. And there's this, whoop. It was sort of like Doc Brown from Back to the Future.
Back to the Future.
Yeah. It wasn't gray. Yes. I just have to add a chipped tooth and eyes that didn't look at people. I'd be all right. No, Scott, it is actually funny when you look at it. Couldn't look at you, the chipped tooth, hair going everywhere, refused to shower. I was a girl's dream, man.
Thank God for the sporting news.
God, yeah, that was my best friend, man. That was my best friend. God, yeah, I'm surprised my clothes didn't walk themselves.
Too funny. I don't think next up is They Said It, but they can't say it any better than Billy just did. But go for it, Billy.
Alvin Adams. He's accepting the NBA Rookie of the Year honors. He said, "I'd like to thank Coach McLeod, my teammates for making me look so good, and mostly David Thompson for going to the ABA."
That is honesty at its finest right there.
And that name sounds really familiar. Why is that name so familiar to me?
Yeah, we're gonna have him in a couple weeks as our guest when he's on the cover of SI June 7th.
There
So
you go.
looking forward to speaking with Mr. Adams. Mark, another great center, had something to say.
Sure, Alvin Hayes, man, who was playing at that time for the Washington Bullets, and he was asked in a hotel lobby if he was a basketball player because he was 6'10" tall. He said, "No, I clean giraffes' cars." Or no, I'm sorry, I have bad eyesight even with glasses on. No, I clean giraffe ears. But I would like to see a giraffe.
Cars would be better.
Did you guys ever hear that story about Wilt Chamberlain when he'd walk into places and people would say, "How's the weather up there?" And then he'd
No,
spit
it
on
was-
you and go, "It's raining."
Oh, no way, really? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yikes.
Just, I mean, it's raining up here. What a guy.
And then what are you gonna do after he
Nothing.
spits on you?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I can see it's a little cloudy. Gentleman John stands pat. The 1976 Indy buildup featured tension between innovation and imitation, with rival teams joking that George Bignotti's new Wildcat cars looked more like copycats of A.J. Foyt's successful designs. Bill, how did another past guest of ours do this year?
Johnny Rutherford. He won the pole position. He actually had the same speed as Mario Andretti, but Johnny Rutherford, I think, was first, so he gets it.
Rookie driver Janet Guthrie drew enormous attention as the first woman ever to practice at the Indy 500, handling constant media scrutiny and sexist taunts while struggling with unreliable equipment and limited track time. She was getting it from all the guys. Oh, that didn't come out.
Wait a minute.
That didn't come out the
I
way.
think you need to rephrase
no.
that.
So, Janet, you're getting it from all the guys. Did you ever race?
You ever
Oh my God.
you ever have that happen where like your mind has already finished the
Yes.
sentence and you're like, uh-oh. Oh, it was not a good week for Janet. Let's just say that. Well, it should have been a great week. It was a historic week,
Yeah.
that's for sure. Mark, spoiler alert, who won and how?
Well, Johnny Rutherford wins the race, but it's after a rain delay. So, which I find fascinating because, it's sort of anticlimactic. They have all this delay because of the rains, and then finally they decide to call the race, and they revert back to the completion of lap 102, and so Rutherford's declared the winner. So he literally walks to victory lane. He doesn't even use a car.
Wow.
And AJ Foyt was trying to become a 5-time or 4-time winner there. The following year, AJ would win the Indy 500 for the 4th time and last time in his career. And the other thing, Janet Guthrie, who doesn't make doesn't make the race that year, would qualify the following year. So.
Yeah, she finished 9th in the 1978 race. Well, she was driving with a fractured wrist, which
Lovely.
you can't be injured when you drive, but she injured it in a charity tennis event. But she hid it from race officials and still drove.
Oh, wow. That's a great little story. Nice.
Yeah.
That's much better than getting it from all the guys.
and that was off the track. So, no, sorry.
Oh, God help us. And God bless the Canadiens. Scotty Bowman brilliantly adjusted Montreal's strategy against the Flyers by matching their physical style and using defenseman Pierre Bouchard on a muscle line to counter Philadelphia's toughness. The Canadiens evolved from their old free-flowing type of offense into this scoring, disciplined team that basically took out the previous Stanley Cup winners, the Flyers. Billy, Bobby Clark said they're the best hockey team I've ever seen. These Canadiens, they were something.
Well, yeah, when you have 9 future Hall of Famers on a team, that does take you pretty far, including Larry Robinson, Yvonne Cornier, Bob Gainey, Guy Lafleur. You had just every wave after wave of great players. But Montreal, really knew Bowman was really good. He pretty much shut down Bobby Clark by double shifting every time there. I think it was Gainey and someone else. Every time Bobby Clark was on the ice, those guys would come on. Bobby Clark had 119 points during the season, only 3 assists during the Stanley Cup Final. Montreal was amazing.
Wow. Yeah, Mark, this was a sweep, but actually it was a very close. Each game was very close.
Yeah, so Montreal wins all 4 games, but by a total of 5 goals. So the first 3 games were all decided by a goal. It was the last game decided by 2 goals. That's a tight series.
And also remember, the Flyers were without Bernie Parent. That might have made a difference. He won the past 2 cups. You never know what would happen if his back didn't flare up.
Well, any past guest of past our prime will make a difference when they're
damn right. And one more thing about the Canadiens, how dominant they were in the 70s. They won 7 championships during the 70s. So 7 of the 10 years, Montreal was hoisting the cup.
Defenseman Larry Robinson, our cover guy, emerged as Montreal's enforcer and emotional leader, delivering crushing hits while also defending teammates against those Broad Street Bullies intimidation tactics that wasn't going to work on Mr. Robinson. Those Canadians were great in the 70s, thanks in large part to Larry Robinson. They won another cup in the 80s. They won their last one in 1993 when they beat I'll say this real quietly, the LA Kings. Nick Nickson was behind the mic for the Kings for over 40 years, starting in 1981, a Hall of Fame broadcaster. Nickson saw firsthand some of those great Canadian teams, as well as a couple of pretty darn good Kings ones as well. And he joins us now on the Pop Podcast. Hey, Nick, how you doing today?
Good, Scott. Nice to be with you guys. And boy, I retired after last season almost a year ago to the day last May. And I can't believe that we're talking about something that I was living through and knew what to talk about 50 years ago. I started out in the American Hockey League in the 75-76 season. And as I was looking up some information about our topic here today, Montreal, of course, they winning the Cup 50 years ago and still alive in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. When I was doing the games for the Rochester Americans my first year, the team that won the Calder Cup that year was Montreal's farm team, the Nova Scotia Voyageurs. So they had it going both in the system and at the NHL level, starting with that 75-76 season.
Yeah, so Larry Robinson is the guy on the cover this week of SI, and he's just one of many Hall of Famers on that Canadiens team. What made Larry stand out even on a roster that was that talented?
Yeah, I've been fortunate because later on, after Larry retired as a player, he became a coach, and he coached the Kings for 4 seasons, beginning in 1996. So I got to know Larry quite well. Doing the radio pregame shows, we always talked to him before every game. And, if I had to make a list of top 5 people I've known in hockey over the years, Larry would be on that list. He's just a genuine guy. And, his accomplishments as a player and a coach surpassed by few. But the one stat that boggles my mind and other people just shake their head at, his plus-minus rating. I think it's plus 790 or 780, which is the best in the history of the game. Now, back in the 30s and 40s, they didn't keep those stats, but they didn't play that many games. So I'm quite sure that Larry would have the record anyway. But a tower of strength. And when the Canadiens were in the playoffs in 76, you got to remember in 74 and 75, the Broad Street Bullies won the Cup, the Philadelphia Flyers. And I remember when Larry coached the Kings, he told me a story that in a preseason game in 1975, after the Flyers had won the Cup, they played a game against the Flyers, and the Flyers were notorious for bullying everybody. And I don't know which coach, Fred Shero or Scotty Bowman, they put out 5 of their toughest players to start the game. So Montreal matches that. And Larry was one of those players. They had Rick Chartrand, they had Doug Riseborough, they had Mario Tremblay, and both teams could go that route. And Larry told the story how in that game, They dominated the Philadelphia Flyers, won the game, won the physical battles, won the fights. And that kind of started Montreal on a surge where they didn't have to worry about Philadelphia anymore. And Philadelphia knew that they couldn't play their game against Montreal. It wasn't going to work. And as you look back, Philadelphia had won the previous 2 cups. Who won the next 4? The Montreal Canadiens. So that 75-76 season, with guys like Larry Robinson, Guy Lapointe, Serge Savard on defense, perhaps the best 3 defensemen any team could have or has ever had at the same time, just dominated. I mean, I was looking at some of the stats. I mean, not only did they win 4 cups, but they averaged 57 wins a season. They only lost like 13 or 14 home games in 4 years. I mean, it one of the best 4-season stretches, I think, ever in NHL history when the Canadiens won those 4 straight.
They're the best hockey team I've ever seen. That was what Bobby Clark said after the Canadiens swept the Flyers, the 2-time defending champions, in the 76 Stanley Cup. Do you think people, Nick, fully appreciate today just how dominant those late 70s Canadian teams were?
You know, that started a run when Montreal won 4 straight, where you could say you had some dynasties develop. Now, Montreal was great almost every other year up until they won those 4 straight. They won 5 straight, which is still a league record in the late 50s. But after Montreal won 4 in a row, the Islanders won 4 in a row. Then when the Islanders dipped, Edmonton won 5 times in 7 years. So in that stretch of 15 years, beginning in 1976, you basically had 3 powerhouse teams that dominated the league in Montreal, the Islanders, and the Edmonton Oilers. But statistically, it's hard to go against the Oilers with Gretzky and Messier and Anderson and Paul Coffey in the early 80s. But, I mean, as far as night after night after night being a dominating team, tough to beat that stretch of 4 years for Montreal.
Yeah, I remember those years being a big Kings fan back in the 70s. Montreal was just belligerently good all the time. But back to that cup year for Montreal, and in that decade, what made Larry Robinson such a good defenseman?
Well, he had the size, obviously, which helps if you're a defenseman or a defensive player in any sport. But he could skate, and his skills were elite in terms of measuring his offensive capabilities to the average defenseman in the NHL. A complete package, I guess, is what you would call it. He was a little bit bigger than Guy Lapointe and Serge Savard, who in their own right were good offensively. I mean, imagine that. I mean, having those 3 type of players on your team for like 10, 12 years as teammates. But, Larry, he's a young kid. And he told me this. He says when he was younger, he was kind of like a gangly kid and, like probably skated like a deer with his legs, extruding out but he grew into his body and he became muscular and developed into a player that everybody thought he was going to be if you're Montreal and you're scouting him as a junior. But what he could bring, I mean, I remember watching those games. I mean, he would go end to end and go through the team and shoot. I mean, he could do that. Mm-hmm. It was always defense first, of course, and that was Montreal's mantra for years. But he had the ability to create offense. And when the time called for it, he could come through and get the job done.
And also, I learned a lot about it when I start reading on these guys. He was a great defenseman, but he was also not afraid to take on the tough guys. He was a tough guy. He was at the Stanley Cup as well.
Yeah, and that's why I alluded to that story. He talked about when they met the Flyers in that preseason game, and he was one of the 5 guys that Scotty Bowman put out on the ice because he knew he could handle himself. Yeah, he had the long reach, the long arms, the long legs. I mean, he just ate up the ice, and he could eat up opponents if they wanted to drop the gloves. I don't know. You could go through the list of great defensemen in the history of the NHL and write down what they brought in. Would this be the quintessential defenseman that every team would love to have? It would be tough not to have Larry Robinson be the prototypical type of defenseman that you'd want. I mean, Coffey, or Bork. I mean, but Larry brought everything. He brought everything.
And I know I'm going up a little bit farther because when he joins the Kings, what type of cachet did he bring? I remember when they signed him, I was excited with the cachet, and you see him in person. How did your thoughts change on him when all of a sudden he's on the Kings?
Yeah, it was towards the end of his career, and I remember it. It was, I think, 1989. The Kings had signed him to a 3-year contract. Get this, I think it was for $500,000 a year, which is not even the league minimum today. But the Kings were in a position, because they had acquired Gretzky in '88, where they felt, okay, they have a window here where they could be a serious cup contender. And I thought for those first 5 years that Gretzky was with the Kings starting in '88, that every season that started, 88, 89, 90, that yes, we're a contender. And they added pieces after they got Gretzky. Larry Robinson, John Tonelli. They brought in Yari Curry. They traded Bernie Nichols. You mentioned him earlier. They got Sandstrom and Granato. So they had all the pieces. It didn't work out. They had some key injuries to key people in those playoff years that kind of held them back a little bit. But they were right there. They were right there, and they had to go up against, in that day, a very good Calgary team and still a very good Edmonton team. You had to get through not one but both if you wanted to advance, and the Kings did on a couple of occasions, but couldn't get all the way through.
So that 76 Stanley Cup Finals, it's a 4-game sweep, but people don't understand how close the series was. Every game except the last game was decided by 1 goal, the last game by 2 goals. Talk about, I mean, there's such a thin line between winning and losing a game.
Yeah, and I'm not so sure. You mentioned the close games. I don't know if either team had a 2-goal lead in any of the games. That's how close it was. The Flyers had, Reggie Leach, who I think that playoff year at the time set the record for most goals at 19 in a playoff season. Close games, but you look at the makeup of Montreal then, when we look back on it, and I always do this when we talk about the Edmonton Oilers in the early 80s. They had 8 or 9 Hall of Fame players, as it turned out. Same situation for Montreal. Robinson, Savard, Lapointe in the blue line. Ken Dryden, who didn't play that long in the NHL, but almost won every single year he played. The coach, Scotty Bowman. You had Guy Lafleur. You had Jacques Lemaire. They just had, and I guess when you're dominating a sport for a stretch of years, you almost have that type of talent as you look back on it. Oilers, probably we could say the same thing about the Islanders, Bossy, Trottier, Pod Van Gillies, Billy Smith, things like that. But a roster that, and here's the thing, and I'll bring this up because it was a key when the Kings won their first Stanley Cup in 2012. Every defenseman in 2012 for the Kings played every single game. Darryl Sutter, their head coach, had the same 3 sets of defense night after night after night. And if you look at that year for Montreal, I think they won 12-1. They only lost 1 playoff game. Their defense was there every night. I think their entire roster, only a couple of players missed 1, maybe 2 games at the most. But to have that type of talent, the goaltending, the health, I've always said, and I still say it as I watch the Stanley Cup playoffs here in May, 3 things are keys in the playoff. You've got to have health, you've got to have good goaltending, and your special teams. You can't be bad in special teams. And Montreal certainly proved to everybody that they had all 3 for 4 straight years.
I mean, talk about the mystique of the Canadiens. I mean, founded in 1909, 24 Stanley Cup titles, the last, unfortunately, against the Kings. But talk about the mystique about that franchise.
Special. I know I was watching Buffalo Montreal game 6 in Montreal, and I can remember sitting in the Forum when we played them in the finals in '93, and I just looked around, and every seat is taken, and the enthusiasm, and it's always a positive energy when you play in Montreal. And then you look around the building and you see all these former players that have their pictures and the dates they played for the Kings up around the wall. It's like a shrine for the game of hockey, certainly for Montreal, but anybody who appreciates success in the NHL and has followed it for years and years, you can appreciate that type of feeling you get when you're watching history, and it still unfolds. It was always special for me going to Montreal. Don't mean to harp and make this a negative connotation, but when I started with the Kings in 1981, I think I worked 9 or 10 years for the Kings before they won a game in Montreal. I mean, you go into Montreal, and of course, all the French Canadian kids who were on the other teams, their families are loving it. Luke, I remember Luke Robitaille went there. His mom and dad would be. I'm playing in Montreal. I'm playing in the shrine of hockey, and you knew it was special for them. It still is for players today, and it was for me, and I'm sure it is for a lot of other people that go and see one of the great venues. Now it's the Bell Center, but it's just as exciting as the old Forum. And you're looking at one of the most successful franchises in the history of sport. Well, they have the most titles, right? More than New York and the Yankees.
Yeah. We are talking with Nick Nickson, Hall of Fame broadcaster for the LA Kings for, what was it, Nick? 44 years?
44 years. Yeah,
Oh.
I did my first 6 years in the American League, Rochester, where I'm from, and then New Haven, the Nighthawks for 4 years. And then in 1981, I joined the Kings.
Who would have ever thought you'd become an Angelino?
Certainly not me. I tell people when I got the job, the season had already started, and Pete Weber, who was working with Bob Miller on the Kings broadcast, had left to do basketball in the NBA. And the Nighthawks, New Haven Nighthawks, that season were the Kings AHL affiliate. So I got a call from the Kings assistant coach, Parker McDonald, who was our coach in New Haven. And he said, Nick, this guy's leaving. If you're interested, send me a tape and I'll get it to the right people. So I sent them a tape. And when I got the job, and I remember flying from JFK to LA, I had never been west of Ohio in my life. So I'm in for a culture shock. And okay, we'll come out for a couple of years, see how we like it. And now everybody comes to visit me. It worked out well.
Yes, absolutely. You know, Bill was a diehard Kings fan as a kid, and he more often than not died hard.
I did.
There was the organization.
We were dying along with you, Bill.
I know.
Yes,
but hey, man,
yes.
that definitely great memory.
Right. And then, had its ups, its downs, but mostly its downs. And then in August of 1988, the trade of the century, and all of a sudden the Kings are the mecca of the NHL when Gretzky comes to LA. What was that like as a broadcaster to be like, oh my goodness, we are now no longer not on the radar here. We are now the thing in Los Angeles. Yeah, and we got a quick glimpse of that the night of the trade, because when the trade was made in August of 88, Wayne Gretzky had a press conference in Edmonton in the morning. Glenn Sather was there along with some of his teammates.
Then he flew to LA for a press conference later that night. And it was the Kings had rented out a ballroom at one of the hotels near the airport at LAX, which they had never done before. And we showed up, and there were no fewer than 300 members of the media there, not only from LA, but they came in from other cities, major networks. You know, back then you had UPI and AP doing a lot of the stringing. They were all there. And if you just looked around the room, you said, boy, this is going to change things, isn't it? And it certainly did. And I remember that was the year the Kings changed their uniform colors. They went they went from the purple and gold to the black and silver, which was designed after the Hull Olympics, which was a team that Luke had played juniors for. And I remember Bruce McNall came out, the owner, and he welcomed everybody. And there's, like I said, hundreds of people in the room, and they all know why they're there. And he says, well, I want to invite you out, and you know, thanks for coming. And we're going to show off our new uniform tonight. So what do you mean? Come on. You know? So out walks Gretzky with the new uniform on. So he was the first King to wear that new purple and black, black and silver, and I guess, yeah, white. I think there was some silver in it. It's changed again over the years, but yeah, that coincided with Gretzky coming. And a story I also like to tell is our season ticket department had I think 3 full-time employees. And after the trade, they had so many requests for tickets. They called me up. They called up other people. You know, I had the summers off then because we're not broadcasting. Nick, can you come down and help us return these messages? So I go down there. They give me a stack about 4 inches tall of phone messages. That's at least 100 messages. Can you call? Okay, I'll call. So I call and I say, hello, this is Nick Nickson with the LA Kings. I understand you're interested in buying tickets to the Kings. And I remember, and this sums it all up, what the trade meant. The guy said to me, Nick, I've never seen a hockey game in my life, but I've heard of Wayne Gretzky. I want tickets. And that always stuck with me because you talk about the trade of the century. It certainly was, because it not only put the Kings on the map in Southern California, but it helped put the game on the map in all of the other U.S. markets. And that, of course, led to the expansion because the game became so popular with not only fans, but also youngsters who wanted to play.
From your perspective, Nick, how did it change for you personally? You know, I'm not saying that you didn't take your job seriously beforehand. Of course not. You're a pro's pro. But did you realize that it was going to be a little bit different now with Gretzky there?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Excuse me. The games were all sold out, which had never happened before. We'd go on the road, and the games were all sold out. We'd check into a hotel at 2 a.m, and I don't know how they get the itinerary, but there'd be 30 fans there looking for autographs, which never happened before Gretzky. So, yeah, we were a major news item. Whether or not we won the game or not, we had Wayne Gretzky. We had arguably the greatest player in the history of the sport. And to be around it night after night, I use this analogy. I've marveled at Connor McDavid. The Kings played the Oilers 5 straight years in the playoffs. And after we played them the first year, which is 5 years ago now, I saw McDavid every other night for 6-7 games. How good he was consistently. And that was the appreciation I had for Gretzky when I could see him every single night, 82 times a year. Kings played the Oilers 8 times in the regular season when they were rivals. And I knew how great he was. But when you see a talent like that night after night, the excellence that they bring night after night. They don't take a night off. Their poorest game would be the best game for 50% of the league. So, yeah, a greater appreciation for him. And as far, it elevated all of us in Southern California. People knew who the Kings were. They knew who Gretzky was. They knew who the other players were. They knew Bernie Nichols, who had been a great player for a number of years in LA. They now knew how great he was. And they were watching the games. We went from 15 games on TV when I started in 1981 to 37 in the mid-'80s to almost every game being televised when Gretzky came. So the exposure for the broadcasters is there via TV, via radio. More people are watching, listening, going to the game. So you became more of a newsworthy item, I guess you'd say, because of that trade and because of Gretzky becoming a King.
Now, obviously, we all know about Gretzky's stats and everything that he's done. You got to know him. What kind of person is Gretzky?
Very humble, very obliging. I mentioned the fact that when we got Gretzky, we'd go on the road and check into a hotel in the middle of the night, and there'd be 30 people there looking for autographs. No one has signed more autographs in the NHL than Wayne Gretzky, and his autograph is legible. You guys can appreciate that. Some guys just, number 8, no, 17. Who is this guy? Well, I mean, humble, obliging, genuine, down to earth. Just, we talked about, the torch being passed from Gretzky to Lemieux to Crosby, Ovechkin. I mean, it takes a special person to not only do that, but you have to want to do it, because it can be a distraction to be the face of a league, the face of a franchise, which he was, but he handled it beautifully. And, he never wanted to take a night off if it wasn't I know there were games where he looked awful in the morning skate with the flu and he'd go out there and play and get 3 points. I mean, he didn't want to disappoint. It reminds me of that line Joe DiMaggio once had years ago. He was my dad's favorite player. My dad grew up in New York. Someone asked Joe after a game, well, how come you're winning 7-1? How come you slid? And so he says, well, there might be someone here that's watching me for the first time. I don't want to let them down. And I think guys like Gretzky and in that ilk, I think they think that same way.
I'll tell you, at least for me, how the times changed. In 1987, I went to the Kings-Oilers playoff game. Day of game, we went up, got tickets for $18.95, second row behind the goal. Now, go up 6 years later, and they have Gretzky. The tickets were really, really high. I went to the Vancouver series, and the Kings at that point had never been past basically the second round of the playoffs, had never been passed. I have never been to a place that was as loud as that Forum on that day. You as a broadcaster sitting back, and you have a lot more history with the Kings than I do. How did that feel, to feel that energy in the Forum in those days?
Yeah, it's special. As we all know, Gretzky broke Howe's record at the Forum. And we all knew that night was coming, and fortunately it happened on home ice. And those are moments where, for someone like me, sure, I've got to broadcast the game and describe what's happening because I'm doing radio. You don't see the pictures. But nights like that, you just lay out, you take off your headset, you soak it in. I did that when we were counting down the seconds in the 2012 Cup run. And again, fortunately for Kings fans, they won it on home ice. And I've had the writers over the years tell me I've never heard that building so loud. And everybody's got their phones going, and grown men, women are crying and hugging each other. And I wanted to leave the booth and hug every fan near me. Because I'm a fan. I felt the same way. People like, Bob Miller, who did the games for 44 years, trainer Pete Demers, who was there for pretty close to 40 years. I remember sitting on the plane with those guys, and we, after a loss on the road, and we'd shake our heads and go, we're never going to see it, or we're never going to see it. Then all of a sudden, 2011, 2012.
Mm.
They're out of the playoffs. They make a coaching change in December. They barely get in. And look what we have 3 months later, a Stanley Cup. So, yeah. I think, and I know people have asked me, because when I did radio, which was for most of my career, we did a talk show after. And when we won the cup, people said, well, Nick, were you emotional I couldn't get emotional. I had to do a post-game show. I had to do a Kings talk for 45 minutes, an hour. It was 3 hours that night because we had won the cup. So you got to keep it, within, but you're thinking to yourself, I just want to take off the headset and go have a party with the rest of the fans.
You mentioned him a little, but one of the guys that really, really was a huge part of my childhood was Bob Miller. Tell me about Bob. To me, one of the greatest announcers ever. He could make a game. It could be 10-1 Montreal, and Bob Miller made it seem like it was the 7th game of the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
Score! They're down 10-2.
Yeah,
exactly. Tell me about Bob Miller.
Yeah, wonderful individual. He and his wife, Judy, have been so kind to so many people who have come through the Kings organization over the years, like myself and my wife and our family. And Bob and I worked together for 9 years, because back in the early 80s, like most teams, very few games were televised. So the bulk of our games were done on radio only. And when we did TV, which was, as I mentioned earlier, 15 times a year, 15 road games, we do a simulcast. So Bob and I got to, work, together night after night for those 9 years. And a lot of people over the years have mentioned to me how much they enjoyed the Kings games when the two of us were doing them in the 80s. And I think, and this is taking nothing away from the ex-athletes that become analysts, which most analysts are these days. But I think because Bob and I were trained as broadcasters and we knew the ins and outs of a broadcast and how to present a broadcast, I think that's why the two of us meshed so well. And I think people have appreciated that over the years. At least they've told me that. But you can only have that happen if you don't have egos getting in the way. And I'd like to think of myself as one that just is there. Let's have fun. Let's announce the game. You got something you want to say, go ahead. I don't consider myself being someone who has a big ego. I don't think Bob did either during the games. And I think that's why the people that have worked with me, besides Bob over the years, I've had Darrell Evans for over 25, almost 30 years. Brian Engblom when we split the crews, Mike Allison, Jim Fox has worked with Bob for over 30 years. And I think they would probably echo those sentiments because you need that. I mean, but Bob is such a wonderful personality, has been loved by the fans over the years. And I only wish him and his family the best moving forward. And he's been retired now for almost 9-10 years. And he's still hanging in there. I talk to him periodically, slowing down a little bit, but he's still got that great sense of humor and the great storytelling ability.
So when you start, Jack Kent Cooke is the owner of the Kings. And they're very similar to the Lakers. They're both wearing purple and gold and stuff like that. And then Bruce McNall becomes the owner and things change. Gretzky comes in, the colors change to black and silver. Describe the change and how different McNall was from Cooke.
Well, Cooke was the original Kings owner, but you got to remember, Cooke sold both teams and the Forum to Jerry Buss, Dr. Jerry Buss, the year before I came to LA. I think he bought them in 79 or 80. And then he gave a partial share of the Kings, not the Kings and the Lakers, to a fan whose name was Bruce McNall. And Bruce just loved hockey. And after a year of being a part owner, he bought everything. He bought the entire team. So for us who had been working for Dr. Jerry Buss and going back before that, people like Bob Miller and Pete Demers, the Jack Kent Cooke years, this was like a breath of fresh air because now the Kings have an owner. The only thing he cares about is hockey. And not to say that Dr. Buss didn't care about hockey, but you got to remember in the 80s, this was Showtime. This was Lakers. It was the Lakers ruled the roost. Probably more popular in that era than the Dodgers were, which is saying a lot for Los Angeles, right? So when the Kings get an owner who is going to focus his entire, business model into hockey, I think we all felt, okay, this is a great move. And then in 2 years, he winds up, how do you get Wayne Gretzky, the greatest player in the world? He orchestrated that trade. He knew Peter Pocklington in Edmonton was having financial difficulties. He called him and he said, I'm really in Pocklington. No, I'm not trading him. Well, he calls him back 6 months later. He says, we might be able to work something out. Bruce goes, oh, okay. He hangs up the phone and calls Rogie Vachon, the GM. And he goes, I think we can get Gretzky. And in August of '88, they get Gretzky. So having an owner that was just all in, all the chips were in on Kings hockey was huge, because I think you start with Bruce, then you add Gretzky, and you look at what's happened to the franchise since. Stanley Cups, competitive teams, great players, Doughty, Kopitar, Dustin Brown, on and on, Jonathan Quick. It was one of the turning points of the franchise where you could say this was when Kings hockey really took off.
As great as Gretzky was, as great as he changed the Kings franchise, the greatest memory I always have is back in 1982 in that miracle in Manchester against the Edmonton Oilers. Yeah. Talk about that game, because I remember I'm working and they're down 5-0 and I think it's over.
Well, you're not the only one who thought it was over. Dr. Jerry Buss was at the game. He left after 2 periods. He went to Palm Springs, and the Kings, and he's listening to the game on the way to Palm Springs. 5-1, 5-2. His driver says, Dr. Buss, do you want to go back? No, I'll jinx it. Let's keep driving. 5-3, 5-4. And he gets into the Kings tie it with seconds left and win it in overtime. That was my first Stanley Cup playoff series as a Kings announcer. So you talk about getting thrown to the wolves and into the excitement of a Stanley Cup playoffs. And the interesting thing about that series, the Oilers had like 48 more points than the Kings in the regular season. You heard me right, 48 more points. So who's the favorite in that series? The Kings start the series in Edmonton and they win the first game. I think it was 10-8. Second game is a low-scoring game, then the Oilers win it. Go back to LA, 11 goals, miracle Manchester game. Kings win it on Darrell Evans' overtime goal, 6-5. Kings lose the next game at home. Now they go to Edmonton for the 5th and final game. First round was best of 5 back then. Kings win another high-scoring game. I think it was 7-4. So here the Kings are, a decisive underdog. Like I said, so many points behind Edmonton in the regular season. And Edmonton was averaging like 5 goals a game in the regular season. And lo and behold, the Kings come out and beat the Oilers at their own game. All 3 games the Kings won were the high-scoring games against the highest-scoring team in the league. And the Oilers won the 2 low-scoring games. It was a crazy series, but I mean, a comeback that we're likely never going to see again in a playoff game, down 5 in the 3rd period, and you wind up winning it. But it was my baptism to the Stanley Cup playoffs, and if it's going to be this exciting every year, this is going to be a lot of fun.
What a baptism!
Yeah.
So we do a trivia segment here on the show.
What do I win? Popcorn?
You win the same thing as if you lose. Nothing.
You win a past our prime pen.
There you go.
We got those.
Mark will, or Bill will deliver it right to your house.
I'll have to bring it right to you. Yeah, I can see you at Albertsons and go, there you go, buddy.
So here's your trivia question. One of the greatest hockey movies of all time is Slapshot, which came out 49 years ago. So true or false, Paul Newman, the star of the movie, actually played hockey as a youth.
False.
It is false. The second lead in the movie, Michael Onking, actually played hockey at the University of New Hampshire, but he was an act, so he was realistic in his role. He knew how to skate.
And didn't he portray a hockey player in a couple of other movies in his career?
Yeah, he started off as a TV actor. He was in a series called The Rookies, and then and then he did a bunch of movies after that.
Yeah.
And he was in the Twin Peaks series too. But
right. And Bill, being a lifelong Kings fan, would know this.
Yeah.
The brothers in Slapshot,
the Hansons.
One of them was two of them were the Carlsons, who actually were pro hockey players. I think it was it Steve Carlson or his brother? One of them played for the Kings in the early 70s. It was before I got to LA, but yeah, two of the three of them were actually professional hockey players at one time. Yeah.
Nick, I could go to hockey all day. You mentioned something. This isn't the question. I just want to make sure you had talked about that 10-8 game against Edmonton. To me, that's one of the greatest games ever because the Kings were up 9-8 and Wayne Gretzky had a breakaway. And I just remember save Mario Lazard. And I think my heart popped out of my head. I was like, oh my God, they're going to, I remember that. But sorry, my question being, you get the Stanley Cup in 2012. You come back 2 years later, get another one. How does it feel to know you were part of the greatest games and you got 2 Stanley Cups of the Kings in the Kings history?
Well, selfishly, it feels good to announce a winner. Now, I know my job is to be objective, but I think everybody who has listened to me over the years knows that I'm a Kings guy. So I'm rooting for the Kings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't root on the air, but I want them to win. And I think the fans realize that. And that's the way it is with most broadcasters that are employed and paid by the team that they're working for. And, looking back on it, and we mentioned it at the time, Jim Fox, who played for the Kings and still broadcasts for the Kings on TV, it gave the franchise, winning a cup gave the franchise validity. It made us no longer the laughing stock of LA sports, because as you know, Bill, and even in movies produced in Hollywood, they would refer to the Kings, as, what do we need in LA? We need more police. We need, more firemen. We need a better hockey team. I mean, people knew this because they never won. So I think knowing that you're with a franchise, with a team that has won, it makes you, put your shoulders back, your chin up, you're walking a little bit more of a purpose. You're proud. You're more proud of the people that you work with, because they've achieved what everybody sets out to do every single season.
Nick, I'm a Warriors fan, and I don't remember their 1975 championship team. So when they won in 2015, and we had a lot of lean years. We were very similar to those Kings before Steph Curry got there, and they win 1, then they win 2, 3, 4, and I expected after they won that first one to just be jubilant, but really it was more of a relief that it finally happened, that I was going to be alive for it to happen. Is that something you can relate to? Just the relief?
Oh, absolutely. And you look after that first Stanley Cup, the next year the Kings go to the conference final and they lose to Chicago, who won that year again in 2013. And then the Kings get back to the conference final the next year and beat Chicago in Chicago in the 7th game and go on to win another cup. And I remember for the next couple of years, we were all talking with each other, boy, we waited so long to get one. And look at this. Now we've got 2. Like, now we're starting to get greedy, right? All right. When are we going to win the next one, right? Come on, guys, come on. But yeah, when you're invested in a team, in a sport, like the Kings broadcasters have been, like I've been, it's a great feeling of accomplishment. The players win it. Okay. We all know that the players win it, but they're doing it for the franchise, for the fans. And it just, I've had no greater feeling as a broadcaster than doing those games in the 2012, 13, and 14 playoffs. I think we played like 64 playoff games over 3 years. That's like a full season, for crying out loud. And they were all great. They won. And the way they won them in 2012, they were up 3-0 in all 4 series, which has never been done before. Quick was unbelievable. He allowed 2 goals or fewer in all but 2 games. And then in 2014, the Kings won 10 straight road games, which has never been done before. So not only can we bask in the glory of victories, but you look back on how they did it. Winning 3 Game 7s on the road in 2014, never been done before. I mean, all these things that I guess we can go back to the miracle on Manchester, right, guys? Because down 5 goals in the 3rd period, you're rallied to win. Never been done before, probably never will be done again in our lifetime. And what we saw in those playoff years, cup years, for the Kings were likely never to see before from 2012 and 2014.
Yeah, you also came back down from 3-0 to San Jose. I think it was.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, that was in the first round.
Yep.
And I remember leaving the house for Game 4, which was in LA. We were down 3-0. And I got my briefcase. I'm heading out the door. My wife says, well, let's see if they can at least get one. And I'm shaking my head. He says, I don't know what's wrong with this team. They've given up like 17 goals in 3 games, which the best defense in the NHL. What's going on? Then they win Game 4. They go game. Okay, they win that one. And I don't know what changed, but that was another special Stanley Cup moment. It's been done 4 times in league history.
Right. Yep.
And the Kings were the last team to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
A young kid from Rochester, and the next thing you know, you're meeting up with the likes of Larry Robinson and Wayne Gretzky and countless other greats. Nick, we can't thank you enough for joining us today and giving us some insights onto those great Kings teams from yesteryear and some of those not so great Kings teams.
Yeah. Well, Scott, everybody, Bill, Mark, it's been a pleasure to be with you guys. This is a great format you've started, and I've got to start listening because I've been a sports fan my entire career. Played sports as a kid. Baseball and hockey were my loves. Growing up in upstate New York, we could play on the frozen ponds in the winter. But the next best thing for me to not being able to play the game as a pro is to announce it. And I've been very fortunate to have had a good career. 50 years, pretty much within a year after I graduated from college, I was doing pro hockey games in the AHL. And last May 1st, I did my last game, and I have no regrets. And I'm very much happy with where I'm at and looking forward to many years of playing golf in retirement.
You know, the one thing we didn't ask is hockey's got to be the hardest sport to call because so much is happening so fast.
And I tell this to a lot of young announcers that ask me for advice over the years. Says, what are the keys? What are some of the keys? And I go back to my first game I did at Ithaca College. We played at Lina Rink, which was where Cornell played, because Ithaca didn't have a rink. My buddy and I rented the equipment. I think I was a sophomore. So I'm 18 years old. And I thought I had prepared for the game. The game starts, the center wins the draw, the pass goes from center to D to wing, and I still am trying to figure out who the center is. So the lesson I learned right there was if you're going to do hockey, especially on radio, you've got to know the players. And from my first game as a professional broadcaster to my last one, every time I prepared for a game, that was my priority. Making sure I knew who every player that was going to play in the game was, what their number was, their name, because the game moves so fast. As you guys know, it's the only sport where they change while the game is still going on.
Yeah.
You know, basketball, you need a whistle, then you sub. Baseball, you get a pinch hitter, they walk back. Football, offense plays defense. I mean, Hockey, it's boom, it's not, and you can go 7-8 minutes without a whistle. So unless you know the players, and I think over the years you learn some tricks, you learn the cadences and the ins and outs and different ways to describe things. But that's the advice I give, and that's the one thing that I learned early on is you better know who the players are. You're right, it is, and what I've always prided myself in trying to do is paint the picture. Like I tell young people, Brown's got the puck, but where does he have it?
Mm-hmm.
Brown on right wing to center ice to the red line, to Kopitar on the left wing inside the line, down at the left circle. He shoots, it goes what? So if you're listening, you can get a visualization. If you just throw out names there, where's the puck? So that was also something I thought I did pretty well throughout my career.
Preparation, Nick, it served you well. So thank you so much for being with us. If you see a little guy accosting you in the frozen section of Albertsons, turn the other way.
Just run. Just run.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Rookie cards of baseball, basketball, and football stars are iconic pieces of American history, and they have been outstanding investments over the last 50 years. Now, key issues of Sports Illustrated, professionally graded and encapsulated by CGC, have emerged as an exciting alternative to trading cards. ThePit.com is the leading online exchange for investment-grade sports magazines. General Manager Mark Humphreys offers Sports Illustrated first cover editions featuring stars like Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, Derek Jeter, Ken Griffey Jr., and so many more. We're talking hockey this week on Past Our Prime with the Canadiens' Larry Robinson on the cover of Sports Illustrated, and joining us to tell us about that cover from 50 years ago is the CEO of ThePit.com, Mark Humphreys. And Mark, your thoughts on this one?
Well, I love how this is apparently a transition era with this cover in 1976, where the Flyers' Mel Bridgman, the guy getting clocked in the face, he's wearing a helmet, but Larry Robinson, the Canadiens' future Hall of Famer, is apparently trusting that his shaggy hair is going to protect him. And as a kid who rode bicycles in 1976 and didn't wear a helmet, I understand how times have changed. They were changing in hockey, and this cover is a snapshot of a violent era. The Broad Street Bullies of Philadelphia here, one of them getting a bit of comeuppance. And yet you see a helmet, and so some safety issues coming into the scene. This is not a particularly collectible cover. Larry Robinson, a Hall of Famer, great player. He's a defenseman, as is typical in other sports. The defensive guys, unfortunately, usually play second fiddle to the goal scorers. But it is very significant in that the Canadiens here were preventing a Flyers three-peat and regaining the cup that the Canadiens had won in 73. So in 73, the Canadiens were champions. The Flyers won in 74-75. Then the Canadiens win in this year, represented by this cover, 1976, and then they win for the next 3 years as well. The Canadiens dominated the 1970s, and Larry Robinson was a big part of that. They won 6 of the 10 Stanley Cups that were decided in the 1970s. They've only won 2 since then, and of course the drastic decline in cups won by any Canadian team is often a subject of discussion for hockey aficionados. There have only been 3 of this cover that have been graded. There are none available at eBay right now. The highest grade given by CGC so far is a 7.5. There are probably some higher quality copies of this issue out there somewhere. They'll probably eventually be encapsulated once we see more hockey collectors coming to the magazine market.
Only thepit.com offers competitive buy now and sell now quotes on graded magazines online, as well as many of the most popular modern PSA graded rookie cards, including Shohei Ohtani, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, Nikola Jokic, and Steph Curry. Trade sports stars like stocks at thepit.com. Then he spoke for himself. The 1976 Preakness became a dramatic turning point in the Triple Crown season as Bull Forbes suffered a painful hoof injury after the race, casting doubt on his future even after his gutsy effort against Honest Pleasure. And that opened the door for who, Bill?
Elocutionist. Elocutionist went by 3.5 lengths over Play the Red. But looking at, what we all do is we look at these races, and then we maybe take a look at what happened later. Elocutionist's career, I had no idea about this until I read it. His career ended after that race because of a foreleg injury. I mean, yeah, he got to go to stud, but still never raced again after this race.
Wow. I'm sure he was disappointed. Oh, you mean I just have to have sex all the time now and I don't have to race? I don't have to have some guy on my back? Oh, sure. Yeah. Sign me up for that.
That's right.
It was a huge payoff for owner Gene Cashman, a former Chicago cop turned grade trainer who had almost purchased Bold Forbes instead at a yearling sale a year before for just $15,000. After the win, he celebrated with his daughters in the Pimlico clubhouse, calling the experience one of the great joys of his life. The article points out how unfair the constant comparisons to Secretariat had become. That was just 3 years removed from Secretariat's incredible 1973 Triple Crown win. 50 years later, we're still talking about Secretariat. I was telling you guys that in the Kentucky Derby, 20 horses ran. 19 of them are descendants of Secretariat. Can you believe
That's amazing. When you said that, then I heard it from someplace else. That's incredible.
They should just call it like the Secretariat Stakes, Wow. Have the Suns risen in the West? Yes, the upstart Phoenix Suns shocked the defending champion Warriors by outworking and executing them late in games, pulling off one of the biggest playoff upsets of the decade. The Suns were only 42-40 in the regular season. I think Golden State was 59-23. So that is a big upset, even, regardless of if they were the defending champions. And Mark, yeah, quite an upset.
Yeah, I mean, but it's interesting. So they upset Golden State, who was the favorite. And if Golden State had met the Celtics in the NBA Finals, maybe Golden State wins, back-to-back titles or whatever. But so you would think then Phoenix facing Boston would be a mismatch of a series. But it ended up, even though it won 6, not 7 games, it ended up being one of the best NBA Finals ever. And it had one of the most dramatic games ever. But yeah, I mean, it was a surprise for Phoenix, but happy because an expansion franchise in the 60s, Phoenix experienced a lot of heartbreak, before getting to the NBA Finals. I mean, they were up on the Lakers 3-1, I think in 1970 in the series, and then lost the last 3 games of that series. This was their first taste of, kind of what it's like to be, playing for everything. And Phoenix, they've never won an NBA title.
No.
They've been in the finals a lot.
Yep. But if you look at that team that year, what were they? I think they were 32-36, and they had coming off a 33-point loss to Washington. They end up winning 10 of the remaining 14 games, so they actually went into the playoffs on a good streak, and taking down Seattle, then taking down Golden State. Yeah, there was a nice Garherd block shot that helped them win Game 6, but it was actually they just got hot at the right time. Yeah. And you always have to wonder when they played the Celtics. And it was when they lost the triple overtime game. What happens if they win that game? They go back to Phoenix looking to wrap up the series. Maybe it's different.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. They're up 3-2 if they can pull off that strange miracle of a game, which we will definitely get into when we have Alvin Adams on a couple weeks from now. Rick Barry and the Warriors grew frustrated during this series, with Barry openly criticizing the team's play and saying, "We deserve to lose." So it wasn't like it was a fluke or anything like that. They just got outplayed. One thing I thought that was really interesting is Rick Barry loses to the Phoenix Suns here in the Western Conference Finals. A week later, when the Suns and the Celtics are playing in the finals, he's working for CBS as the color analyst. I mean, and in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Celtics and Cavs battled through a bruising, emotional series filled with injuries. Veteran Nate Thurmond emerged as Dr. Defense for Cleveland, but Boston's championship experience and John Havlicek's toughness helped the Celtics regain control in Game 5. They will close out the Cavs and advance to the finals. 50 million Frenchmen say he's the guy. And who is Guy? Guy Droot? I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Could it be Guy?
Oh, you're probably right. Yes, like before. Guy
Get your
Droot
G's and guys right.
was France's biggest track star heading into the 76 Olympics, carrying the hopes of a country desperate for an Olympic gold medal in men's track for the first time in decades. Mark, he did win in both 72 and this coming year 76.
He sure did. He got the silver in 72 in Munich, but then in 76, he comes and takes the gold on the 110-meter hurdles. To me, the hurdles are the hardest, the athleticism that you need, because not only do you have to be running at a high rate of speed, but then you have to be able to time your jumps while you're doing this. It's crazy.
I remember watching Edwin Moses, and it was, he would do 13 strides in between each hurdle, and you could just count it like clockwork. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, jump. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it was just like poetry in motion. Bill, it's been a while since the Canadians have won in track and field.
Yeah, the French, obviously it was big deal for Guy to win in 76. It would only take another 40 years before another Frenchman would win a medal in the 100-meter hurdles or the 110-meter hurdles. Dimitri Bascu won.
What, in 2016?
Yep.
Who will forget that?
No one. I've watched it many times.
Well, these 76 games are going to be a lot of focus of what we're talking about in the next coming months. And I'm sure Guy Droot will be mentioned once again. TV radio, John Berardino went from being a longtime Major League infielder to becoming one of TV's most recognizable soap opera stars, playing Dr. Steve Hardy on General Hospital for more than a decade. Former owner Bill Veeck remembered Berardino standing on a train dining car after the 1948 World Series, performing Shakespeare for teammates for nearly 3 hours. But he wanted to be an actor more than to play baseball. Mark, take it away.
Oh, yeah. Could you imagine today if a player got up after the game, if Shohei Ohtani got up after the game and started reciting Shakespeare? Well, maybe if he did that, everyone would listen to it.
Or the guy'd get his butt kicked.
But yeah, I remember him. I didn't watch General Hospital as a soap opera. As a kid, you have it on for a minute or two. I knew it was a soap opera, and I knew he was a star of the soap opera. But then I would like old Westerns. Like there was an old episode, I remember The Lone Ranger, and I go, hey, that's Dr. Hardy from General Hospital. What's he doing there? And, as a bad guy, and I had no idea that he was a baseball player. But, from 39 to 52, he played for a bunch of teams, the Browns, I think the Indians and the Pirates. He only had a 249 batting average, so a very journeyman player, but lasted for a long time and then had an interesting acting career. And I was thinking of baseball players that, sort of dabbled in acting while they were playing. And there was a Western on called The Rifleman with Chuck Connors, and Chuck was a former baseball. He actually played Major League Baseball in addition to playing in the NBA for a short time. And so he loved baseball, and he'd have baseball players in their prime on the show. Like he had Duke Snider as a gunman in an episode. He gets killed. He had Don Drysdale in I think 1 or 2 of the episodes. So I always thought it was fascinating. But John obviously wasn't acting while he was playing baseball, but once he got out, he found his true passion and made most of his money acting, not playing baseball.
Oh, for sure. And like you said, a journeyman, but 13 years in the majors. He had to be a pretty good ball player
Oh yeah.
to last that long. And Bill, you have a great little nugget on Berardino.
Yeah, he's the only person to win both the World Series in 1948 and receive a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame.
There you go. I think we should all walk to Hollywood and go check out his star.
Well, it would be a good picture to get. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would.
Yeah, maybe one day. I haven't been down there in a long time.
Oh, I
we'll
used to
just-
walk there all the time.
We'll just get the homeless guy to get off of it for a second. And
Or the weird guy dressed as Elmo.
baseball, two major additions to the minors. Minor league baseball had really shrunk from 58 leagues in 1949 down to just 18 by 1976, thanks to TV, bigger MLB teams, air conditioning, that's funny, backyard barbecues, and other sports taking over. But even with all that, some teams still doing okay. Two guys who had fallen on hard times in the majors found a second chance in the bushes. They
Take it away,
are
Mark.
Bill Valentine and Mark, a guy you know, Denny McLain.
Denny McLain, who can forget? So the first year I followed baseball from day one to the World Series was 1968, dating myself, and that was Denny McLain's 31-game winning season, the last pitcher in baseball to ever win 30 or more games. And he had a great year, and then he won the Cy Young, and then he won 31-6. Then the following year he won 24 games, and I think shared the Cy Young with, I want to say, Mike Cuellar. And then he fell off a cliff. And the Tigers traded him to the Washington Senators, and they got Aurelio Rodriguez, who was their third baseman for the next 4 or 5 years, and Eddie Brinkman, a shortstop, who was their shortstop for the next few years, and Joe Coleman, who won 20-plus games a couple years. It was a great trade. And Denny McLain just fell into oblivion. And then he had gambling problems. Then he got out of the sport, and then his weight ballooned. He got really heavy. And this GM thing didn't last very long either. I mean, he had gotten so much trouble with the law, and he was like, a big hero. He was like on the Ed Sullivan Show, and Ed would introduce like people in the audience, and there's Denny McLain, the hero of 1968 or whatever. But yeah, he was
falling off a
definitely
cliff,
not athletic looking.
It doesn't help anybody.
No.
He won 55 games over a 2-year span. That's unbelievable.
Isn't it?
And he spent a lot of time in jail and bankruptcy, and it's just weird to think. You'd think someone like that would never have any type of issues, but the personal demons seem to take him down.
Yeah.
And then this Bill Valentine, who got fired as an umpire in 1968 for trying to start a union, took over the Arkansas Travelers and nearly doubled attendance. So he was doing quite well.
And shouldn't the umpires be celebrating him? They have a union now.
That's right. Good for Bill. He left his mark, that's for sure.
Yep.
What else is going on baseball this week, 50 years ago? Bill, how about our weekly update on Mark the Bird Fidrich?
Go, Mark.
Well, I've talked about this before. It's a little blurb in here, and it goes, then rookie Mark Fidrich, who's called Bird, not the bird, just Bird, because he incessantly chirps at the ball, telling it what to do. He gave up only 2 hits and defeats the Indians 2-1. And that was the start of the Mark Fidrich run.
The Bird is about to
Use the word.
take over. Much better. That's a great nickname, Bill. Almost as good as Steve Yeager's girlfriend.
Yeah, I'm not sure you want to stick with this one. Her name was Stinky. Now, hey, I'm sure her feet smelled bad, but it's sort of odd. I mean, I don't know if that's, we had a dog named Stinky when I was a kid, but just I thought, wow, Dodgers hit home runs and also make fun of Steve Yeager's girlfriend, who happens to be nicknamed Stinky.
Player of the week, a guy we know, George Brett, Kansas City third baseman, who set a major league record by getting 3 hits in 6 consecutive games. That's just unbelievable. He scored 8 runs, drove in 5, wrapped out 17 hits in 29 appearances at the plate. So he hit .586 for the week. On the beam for Montreal, U.S. gymnastics team in 1976 had 26 of the country's best girls fighting for just 6 spots on the team. The talent level was ridiculously deep. But unlike now, Billy, they were not certain for a medal, not the way they are these days.
No, they finished 6th at the Montreal Olympics. But starting in 1996, 20 years later, the U.S. women would medal in every Olympic Games thereafter. Up until now, they're still medaling. So they had a little, downturn maybe back then. It wasn't mean the girls were bad, just the competition was greater. But nowadays, that doesn't happen to the U.S. women in gymnastics.
Yeah, well, you had Olga Korbut in 72 and then Nadia coming up here in 76. And I think that just spurred a generation, even though they were not American, but television spurred a generation of young little girls to be like, I want to do that. And they haven't stopped doing that for 50
It's
years.
Getting better and better.
Yeah. Hey, let's talk a little pro football. Feathering a nest of Seahawks, the NFL's two 1976 expansion teams, the Seattle Seahawks and Tampa Bay Buccaneers, took very different approaches to getting started. Seattle hires a longtime assistant by the name of Jack Patera as their head coach, while Tampa Bay went with the big-name college coach John McKay from USC. Mark, the Seahawks, they were a big draw in Seattle from the moment they said go.
They were. I mean, you think about it. Seattle had just are about to get the Mariners, so they don't technically have a baseball team yet. They don't have a hockey team. All they've got is the basketball team, which ironically is the one thing they don't have now. But the Seahawks getting a football team, people were so excited. They had already sold 59,000 season tickets before it had named a coach, a player, or even seats. That's how excited they were. And even though like Seattle and Tampa Bay had some really bad years in the beginning, I mean, the Tampa Bay was in the NFC Championship game like 3 years later in '79, and the Seahawks had a lot of playoff runs in the early '80s. They had some Jim Zorn and Steve Largent. They had some really good teams. So they adjusted to play very quickly.
Billy, the Seahawks get their first win ever over who?
Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For fun that they beat the team that they were coming in with, who hired obviously the USC coach that was dominant in college.
Yeah, absolutely. McKay struggled a little bit once he got to Tampa Bay. Patera, the head coach for Seattle, was a former linebacker and defensive coach known for his fearsome foursome and purple people eaters. He's focusing heavily on defense. Quickly signed former All-Pro Mike Curtis and is building around toughness and discipline. Yeah, I remember Patera. He was he hated the media. I remember that about him.
He was also weirdly enough, he was recruited by John McKay when he was in high school and played in Oregon for him, and then ended up becoming a coach against him.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, small.
But I like the fact it was also fun. The Seahawks, when they were before the Seahawks, they had a contest to see what name they were going to pick. Obviously, we know what they chose. I just like some of the names that we're thinking about: anchovies, clam guns, hookers, worms, no names, diarrheas.
Oh my God! Did they go to a kindergarten class and go, "Give me
hookers"?
Pull-ups. I mean, come on.
I like the anchovies though.
Anchovies in bed. Clam guns.
If they fired somebody, they could say the head coach of the anchovies gets canned.
That's right. That's right. Hold the anchovies.
Oh my God, the most disgusting food. I could never eat anchovies. Even
never had.
Come down there, stretch straight, come.
In the long run, Frank Shorter was the defending Olympic marathon champ in 1976. He's the favorite again for Montreal. And Bill, that was because Frank ran and ran and ran. He ran a lot.
He was the modern day Forrest Gump, evidently. He had 80-mile weeks that eventually became 150 to 200-mile weeks. And over 7 years, this is 7 years, he only missed 15 training days.
My goodness.
Thank God. I mean, unbelievable.
You have to be born, and Frank was a past guest of ours, and we're hoping to talk to him again this summer, but like he just must have been born with a body that could endure that, because do you know what kind of pounding that takes? And he's still running to this day.
Yes.
Yes.
But I'm saying your body, I mean, as for everybody, if you work out, run, whatever it is you do, your body does need to get a little rest. And he never took that rest. And we're assuming all he did was run. We don't know what else he did exercise-wise.
Right. Well, he had quirky habits like staying up late and drinking beer. So he was not your typical, athlete in terms of training in that regard, but whatever he did, man, it worked for him. One of the greatest long distance runners in Olympic history.
And I was just going to say on the cover, he looks good. He's got that little red, jogging suit. But then you go to the picture of him in '72 winning the Olympics with the mustache. I mean, he looks like he's a famine victim. I mean, he's so skinny. But again, these long distance runners are skinny and thin. Short distance runners are muscular, and it's a different. But I also remember when we had him on the show. He knew all because he went to medical school initially in New Mexico and then dropped out. He knew all the areas of New Mexico that my wife grew up, which was so funny.
Yes, he did. True. You and him could have talked for hours.
We could have.
And Bill and I would have gladly not listened.
For the record, because somebody's got to keep score.
For the record, Bill, Fred McLeod.
He died at the age of 94. What's so big about Fred McLeod? He won the U.S. Open, and he remained the smallest U.S. Open champion ever at 5'4" and 108 pounds. He ended up winning 4 tournaments. He was a member of he helped start the senior tournament in 1937. So Fred McLeod, 5'4", 108, smallest U.S. Open champion ever.
All right, one of Billy's favorites, Hubie Brown. He's got a new job.
Yes.
Mark.
Yes, he's only 42 at the time. I can't imagine being 42 years old. I always think of him as older. He's announced he's going to be the new coach at the Atlanta Hawks. He's replacing Cotton Fitzsimmons. And what a career, he had. Oh my God. And it was really funny. He played, college ball at Niagara. And I just always think of, whenever Niagara loses a college game, they say Niagara Falls. No, never mind. Whoever they played. Anyway, I don't even get a drum roll for that. It was really bad, I know, but come on. Anyway, long NBA career. Coached the Kentucky Colonels in the ABA, then the Hawks, then the Knicks, then the Grizzlies. He won an ABA title, with the Colonels. He was 2-time NBA Coach of the Year. He got a Lifetime Achievement Award. A great coach, and he's still alive.
Yeah.
He's in his 90s now, and as a color commentator, I always remembered him. So I love me some UB Brown.
Yeah, he loved basketball, and think about that, man. Returned as a head coach to the Grizzlies at the age of 69.
Whew.
That's a grueling job to be the head coach, And he did it very well. 92 years old, Hubie Brown. One of the good guys, from what I'm told.
Faces in
the crowd. Mark, Bruce Kimball. This one does not end well.
No. And how come I always get the depressing stories? I said, okay, here we go, Bruce Kimball. So he's actually featured with his sister, Vicky. He's 12 at the time. Vicky's 15. He was the youngest male ever to qualify for the U.S. Olympic diving trials. Finished 9th at the National AAU Senior Men's 10-meter competition. So, did he have a great career? Well, yeah, but it's what happened. So this is really interesting. So in 1981, he's struck head-on-head by a drunk driver, okay? Every bone in his face is fractured. His left leg's broken. The ligaments in his knee are torn. His liver is lacerated. He has a depressed skull fracture, and his spleen had to be removed. But he comes back and returns to diving in the summer of '82. He makes the world championship, and he's known as the comeback kid. And at 1984, he wins silver, only finishing behind Greg Louganis. So this is a great story, okay? But then in 1988, it goes full circle. 2 weeks before the Olympic trials, Kimball is drunk, okay? And he plows into a crowd of teenagers going 70 to 90 miles an hour. He kills 2 of the boys and severely injures 4 others. He ended up still taking part in the trial. Don't ask me how that happened. Today in social media, there's no way he would have gone that far. He didn't make the team. He pleaded guilty to 2 counts of vehicular homicide and was sentenced to 17 years in prison, followed by 15 years of probation. He got released from prison in 1993. He ended up serving less than 5 years, but his driving privileges were permanently revoked. And then they got reinstated in 2018. But I mean, this is a guy who was almost killed by a drunk driver, and then he kills people as a drunk driver. It's just, you can't make this stuff up.
Bill, what do you have to say?
Well,
on a happier note.
Well,
no, I
that's
laugh
terrible.
because I'd otherwise be crying. A totally tragic story on both ends.
But shows that Bruce Kimball obviously is an amazing athlete and went through something traumatic. But having the situation that he went to is something that he brought on himself. And sometimes the alcohol and stuff is a disease. So even though he's an amazing athlete, sometimes it's hard to stop what your mind wants to do.
Yeah. And I think now with the invention of MAD and the ads that we had growing up about don't drink and drive, and now with Uber and Lyft and stuff, thank God it's not as prevalent as when we were younger, because getting behind the wheel after you had a couple back then was not, you didn't think twice.
No.
And
now, a friend of mine got busted for reckless driving, and he was drunk. He went into court, and the court said, okay, don't do it again. Basically, it was a slap on the wrist. He got nothing.
Yeah.
That was back in the 80s. They just, they let him go.
Not anymore.
No.
And thank God, because these were the tragic results that we had to learn from to make that clear that this was not a way we could continue. So
19th
hole. No grumpy old men this week. William Leggett could not have made a truer assertion regarding Al Michaels' thoroughness and accuracy as an announcer. Michaels was the voice of the Hawaii Islanders AAA baseball club before he moved up to the big time, and he impressed me then as an eloquent and knowledgeable play-by-play man whose delivery was smooth as silk, says J.A. Kinimaka of New York City. To think that 50 years later, he's still doing NFL football, one of the all-time greats. I mean, you hear Al Michaels' voice and you just smile because he's been some of the greatest moments in sports history.
And he always comes off as a real nice guy. I've never heard anyone that's met him, but he sure seems like a good guy.
Loved his book, and Billy, he is a big Kings fan.
I know he is. Oh gosh, yes, that is him and Will Ferrell.
Mount St. Mary's, Billy. This one brings back some memories.
It does. It's from four guys. We'll say Gary T. Engelstead, Bernie Cisco, Mark Meehan, and Joe Walsh and Tom Bay. That makes five of them. I can count. He says, Sir, we enjoyed your article concerning the sports life of our school. However, what are you trying to do? Get us in trouble? Our parents all think we're studying up here. Boom. Thank you for not coming to that story right after Kimball.
I wanted to break it up for you.
Yeah, but that's every or majority of college kids' lives. We're studying, Mom. Yeah, I'm doing well. 2 seconds later, tap that thing.
I will. No comment. Hey, that's our look back at the May 24th, 1976 issue of Sports Illustrated with Larry Robinson of the Habs on the cover, leading the charge as Scotty Bowman's Canadiens took down the Broad Street Bullies. We talked about Bold Forbes and the Triple Crown, Elocutionists winning the Preakness, the wildest play in Yankees history with Jim Mason, Mickey Rivers, and Roy White, Dick Francis and his 60 million books that he sold, including High Stakes, and so much more from that spring of 76. A big thank you to Nick Nickson. He was great, wasn't he, guys?
Very much. Nick Nickson's a man. Listened to him for so many years.
Thank you both to Billy and Mark for another great show. And for all of you listening, I'm Scott Johnston, and Bill, we are
Past Our Prime.